Jim Howard here in Fort Worth, Texas.
Thanks very much for watching.
It's February 27th of 2022. In about 37 minutes, I believe, it will be February 28th of 2022. February has 28 days in it. So it will be March 1st. A couple of days or a day. What's been going on? Well, I forget where I put it, but a little bit of confusion here on my part. I got in this, see if I can get this over here without, this is heavy by the way, without knocking something over. This is what, the mid 2012, I believe, Apple Mac. It's really, really heavy. I mean, it's really built sturdy. The main thing I want to do with it actually is hook it up to a monitor, a full-size monitor. I've got a bunch here, and use it that way. And I'm supposed to, in a couple of days, get the adapter. It's, it uses what came with, which I put up over there on the shelf, but it came with the adapter that charges it, and that one was the old one, or the original one. Worked fine. I ordered a additional one so I'd have a backup. And then somehow today I received a identical one of those. So I'm thinking that I by mistake ordered, two of them. Not sure if I did or not. So I haven't done very much with this because I'm waiting to get it hooked to a monitor. So I guess the monitor will probably go over here. And I'll see how that goes. I just wanted to, it's not that I need a laptop to go anywhere. I never go anywhere. But I want to learn about Apple a little bit. I know it's a little late in life. On March 26th, which is what, 27, 20, I don't know. And I will be 81 years of age. I can't believe it, and I can't believe that I'm alive this long. For some reason, growing up, I never, when I heard dates or something or other, I just never thought I'd be alive then. There was the date for the release of the last Fatima mystery from that event, and I totally forgot all about it as soon as I got out of grade school, and forgot about it till just a few years ago when there was some type of something came up a few years ago, and they said, "Oh, that was," and they mentioned the fourth, I think it was, revelation from Our Lady of Fatima, and like movies or books, 1984, 2000, and the Space Odyssey, 2001 or whatever. I never did the math. I just never thought, I didn't think I'd be alive that long. I also worked all my life. Quite often I had, a full-time job and then a part-time job. So usually I had two jobs. I thought, because I was pretty healthy, I was very healthy when, just a few years ago, that when I went in to have something done at the hospital or something like that, then the nurses are going through the things they go through, Have you ever had an operation? Have you had, this kind of stuff? And then the nurses at these different times would say, "Wow, that's amazing, you've never," and then I would say, "Well, I had my tonsils out." They go, "That doesn't matter, So I really thought that when I retired, and of course I retired at, I think, 62 years of age, but I continued to work for many years after that. It used to be here in the United States that when you retired, then if you continued to work, uh, half of what you were making was going into, you know, being taken as income. Now, if you could do your income tax and maybe get some back or something, but half of what you made, went, you were taxed on it. And so a lot of people wouldn't work when they retired. And then what a lot of people did is they would, with their employer, they would make an arrangement. Maybe they would work, I forget however long it took, let's say, a lot of people would say, okay, well, I'll work half a year for you, or I'll work during the summer or something like that, because it's not worth it for me to work because they take half of what I make. And finally the government got smart, Social Security and everything, they got smart and they stopped that. So so you could work when you retired. Then if you wanted to go to some other type of a job or something, you could do that and not pay a hefty amount for that. But about 65, I started having a little bit of medical problems, enlarged prostate and frequent urination and that kind of stuff. So, but I had always thought that, okay, well, when I retire or whatever, I figured that I would just keep working like I would work, maybe security, 12 hours on Saturday and Sunday or something. That's what I would do. But then eventually I got where I really couldn't do any. And if I was working like a security job, I would have had to tell them, okay, well, I'll work Saturday and Sunday for you, 12-hour shifts if you want me to. It doesn't matter what shift. And I will work at an office building or something like that, sitting in the lobby and checking people in and out. There'd be a few other things to do, but then I realized when I got to about that point, I wouldn't be able to do that because my frequent urination and other problems tied in with that. I'd be sitting in a lobby or whatever, the building locked, and employees would be, maybe coming and they would ring a doorbell or whatever, or they'd see me sitting there, and But I realized that, well, uh, I would need to go to the restroom right away, and somebody would come to the door, and no, I wouldn't have time to even just go over and make them sign in, or what. I would have to go. That wasn't going to work out, so I haven't been working. And that extra money would have come in handy, but I just can't do that or anything. I mean, even here, even here at home, we had a food delivered today, but from Walmart. Now today went okay. My son was awake and everything, but there's times that something comes up and I have to go immediately to the restroom and don't get in my way. So life sucks, but I think that's probably my fault. I thought that working like I did, walking a lot and that type of stuff. But no, I think when they talk about proper eating and doing some cardio stuff, I that's more than what I did. My ex-wife, my ex-wife, and myself and my grown son, we share this apartment and the expenses. That works out good because before, we were living like separately, and all three of us paying, for internet and heating and rent and all that kind of stuff. So three of us living together is better, sort of. But I have had a lot of jobs in my life. I mean, a lot of jobs. Somebody said that to me that I worked with years ago or something like that. And let's see. I'm not sure I can get to it. Toilet. My nose. Somebody said, and I didn't realize, yeah, I've had a lot of jobs. First real job, well, I worked for the post office about 3 Christmases in a row as a part-time employee. And Christmas time, in Kansas City, Missouri, and the major, mail hub there for Kansas City, Missouri area and the cities around or whatever. At Christmas time, they hang on here a second. They hired a lot of employees in part-time. And so for like 3 Christmases, I did that. Then I worked welding as a Boilermaker, in the shop. And for exactly a year, I know it was exactly a year because I quit on my anniversary date. I hired in at the Darby Corporation in Kansas City, Kansas as a welder. It was a union job, although Kansas, of course, was a right-to-work state. So. But, the building was massive because we were building railroad cars. They even had a few cabooses. I worked a couple times. Just, I'm an American, and a lot of people have, like, trains, and a caboose and that type of stuff. I mean, not have, but, are interested in it from history and all that kind of stuff. So there was a few times, we got paid every 2 weeks, and I was working evening shift. And the evening shift people could come in. That was before direct deposit. I graduated from grade school in 1955. I graduated from high school in 1959. There was no direct deposit then, but you could, for the Derby job, that job, you could go in if you worked like the, well, you could, I guess you could do it if you worked the second shift too. You could just go in and pick up your check. What happened is, I'm guessing that we had like 100 guys or 150 working on the evening shift. You're not going to believe this, but the, well, you might believe it if you knew if you knew Boilermakers, but or construction guys or whatever. The guys from the day shift, would get their, check when they went home. But the others would come in early from our shift. They would come in early and pick up their paycheck, and then they wouldn't come to work. So instead of us having 100 or 150 guys working on the shift, there'd be 25 of us or something like that, honest to God. And so the supervisor or supervisors or whatever would have to, just put some guys together, drag you together. So one or two times they put me welding on the caboose, and a time or two they would put me with a guy who normally worked the, can't remember now what it was, the thing where, anyway, he'd get on one end of this piece of steel, and I would get on the other end, and I think we had a little bit of a chain or something on it, or a clamp or something to kind of help hold it up, and then we would shove it into this thing, and then the other guy, because that was his regular job, he'd hit everything, and a massive piece of steel would come down and hit that and bend it where it needed to be, bent from a single long sheet, to something else. And I was kind of skinny, but anyway, a few times I did that. Then what else? And a couple of times they had a guy who was an American Indian of some sort, and he came in he was there. So the railroad, they had it set up where the railroad car would be pushed up onto this like massive hill. By the way, railroad cars are a lot, you look at it, but when you're standing up on one, they're a lot higher up than you think they are. And he would just walk around on the edge of and he was the guy, like, that was his regular job. And and they would have it, the car had been marked, because that was like you're getting ready to it's going to exit. But there'd be places where they marked where wells had not been done. And he'd say, "Oh, over here," but he was just walking around on the edge up there. And I was like crawling, scooting along the thing or whatever, and he was, stand up. I would have fallen for sure off of there. I don't think he'd have cared. But then after that, my third job, where did I go to work? Oh, okay. I think I then went down to, I was heading for Pascagoula, Mississippi. The union told me, well, my father was a business agent, assistant business agent for the Boilermakers Union. Now, he didn't get me hired, and I got no privilege, and I wouldn't have asked him for any special thing, and he wouldn't have given it to me over somebody else. He was an honest man, alcoholic, but an honest man. But he could, because he worked in the office, other places would call, and they'd say, we need welders for like Pascagoula, Mississippi, building or ships and stuff like that. So he told me, he says, Pascagoula, Mississippi, they need, welders down there. So I started out down there. When I got to um, uh, when I got to New Orleans, I checked into the union, Boilermakers Union, and they said, yeah, we got a Convent, Louisiana. There's a construction job there going, building an oil refinery, and we need welders. And I said, I'll go. So they sent me over to a lab where they did a test on my welding. They had some pieces of metal, and you had to, weld it flat. You had to weld it, vertical, and you had to weld it like overhead. And then they put it in a machine, and then they bend it, and where you weld it shouldn't be the place that's going to break it. If it's going to break, it better break someplace else. So I passed, of course, the test, went out there and worked for a while. Then I came back. I'd taken the post office exam, and when I got back after being, down at Convent, Louisiana, when I got back, I got in on a Friday home with my parents. And I got in there, and there was a box of mail for me. I didn't owe any, I didn't need my mail because I didn't, I didn't know anybody. I was actually investing, and I was living with my parents. So I was, I paid them a little something. I don't remember how much it was. Probably not much. Or else I'd have remembered it. But, and the car was paid off, My car was paid off. But anyway, so there was my mail for, what had been gone. And it was a letter from the post office saying, report Monday morning for the post office job. I'd taken the test, And so I went down. I didn't know that much about the post office. Well, I'd worked member 3 years, but I didn't know much about the post office. But I went down, and they were hiring in 200. So we were all there. We had to fill out some paperwork, Did I ever belong to the Lincoln Brigade, or all these, page after page of things that in the past that the government, United States government, considered to be what was it, the Lincoln, I can't remember. That was one that really pissed me off. I knew the history of, Abraham Lincoln Brigade was that, can't remember. Anyway, I had to fill all that stuff out, and then there was like 200. Before long, I was the last one in the room. And so then I went up and I said, my name, I haven't been called. And what's your name? And they looked on the list and they said, your mother called and said that you didn't want the job. And I said, no, my mother didn't, call and say I didn't want the job. And anyway, they went ahead and took care of it, I got hired in. I found out that when I went to take the test for post office clerk, they had mail handlers and they had post office clerks. That was the two, thing. Well, of course, there was other things. But that would be an unusual thing. Somebody could be, like, I'm sure if they needed postal inspectors, that I'm sure you probably could move up from inside, but probably they might do a special and hire in somebody, ex-police officer or something like that. But in general, they had two groups of people. Mail handlers that just threw the stuff in the bags and took the bags, and then the clerks that we sorted the mail. And this group of 200 that were hired in, we were in Kansas City, Missouri, but we were getting the mail sorted for California. So you had to learn a scheme. That's the first, I knew the word scheme, to plot or whatever. I never heard it in that context. You have to learn a scheme, and their scheme is California. And so you had a box for training purposes, and let's say there was 40 or 50 places there, and then you had a stack of cards, and you had to be able, within a certain amount of time, um, sort those cards into the correct slots. Now, it wasn't, you're thinking, oh, that'd be easy, that you put San Francisco into San Francisco, you put Los Angeles into Los Angeles, you put El Rio de Grillo or whatever, you put that in there. No, that you had a few of those cards, or maybe we didn't have any. But you had to know, like for Los Angeles, all the places, cities, and things around, that. And for each one of those, so you had to know that you were putting mail in for all these, and especially speak Spanish names too, a lot of them. So you had to learn that. But then, the reason, did I tell you? No. Then I found out that, like they said, your mother called, said you didn't want the job. When I went to take the post office exam test, two friends from high school went with me, identical twins, Larry and Jerry Winship. And we went in and we took the test, And the test was a little different than, a norm, it started out, they give you the form or whatever. And then it tells you, okay, train number such and such goes between such and such an area and such an area. And here is a list of the times that it goes and when it arrives, and then there's other trains, when you get there and all that was, kind of a different kind of a test, I thought. And so you changed your schedule. That's what you were doing. Okay, you read the information and then you change the schedule. You flip the page or whatever. And then they have the schedule, and then there's more changes. Okay, well, you had to find, okay, I changed that one before, but, you change it again, you do that. Then you get to the test part. And then they're going to ask you, okay, you have to get trained, what train is going to where, what time is it going to arrive, because, and you've made changes to the schedule, Otherwise, you could have just looked up, oh, okay, Los Angeles to Kansas City, Missouri. Okay, there it is. If it wasn't that way, it'd be the train was, all that kind of stuff. So, anyway, when we finished the test, went outside, Larry and Jerry Winship, by the way, there's a video someplace here where Larry and Jerry and myself went to a Fairyland Park. Nobody would name it say Fairyland Park now, or that was 1959 or whatever. We went there and you could go into a booth and you could make a record, a 45 RPM record, and that's what we did. And so we were, I think, seniors in high school then. And that recording is on, a YouTube video here. Not very long, but both of them had passed away. They were identical twins, and they passed away about a year apart, and that was a few years ago. Anyway, we've all three went to take the test at the same time. Now, they had apparently, I think their mother, she was weird. Maybe all parents are weird, I don't know. But I seem to remember that she had given them some flack about, why did you tell him about the test or something, And I went to take the test too, of course you had to apply and everything. And anyway, as we left taking the test, I said, that was pretty easy, it wasn't too bad, And they said, oh yeah, it was real easy. And then they said something, and then I realized immediately they had messed up the scheduling. I I mean, that was part of the test, putting that information. But the important thing, it was all important, but the important thing was after that, then when you're putting in the what time the train arrives and all that type of stuff. And I realized, man, I didn't say anything, but they had um, messed up that part. And so everything would be wrong after that. I mean, that was, and they said, oh, yeah, that was easy. And I didn't say, so knowing the way their mother was too, and maybe I remember a few other things, but I think she called, I know she called, because she would have jumped all over him saying, well, you shouldn't have told him because, he's going to get your job, get the job and keep you from getting it, whatever. By the way, those government jobs or whatever, if you were a veteran, you got like 5 points on your score. Say you got, say I got 80 on the test. Somebody who maybe got 80 on the test too, but was a veteran, they would get like 85. I mean, they'd get an extra 5 points. If you were in combat, or I'm not sure if it was just combat, or if you were, I know if you were had a disability from military service, you'd get more, points. So, but anyway, I'm sure their mother bawled them, and I'm sure she called up and said, well, he didn't want it, meaning me or something. But I mean, I had worked, the previous Christmas times or whatever, and I wanted it, but I think Jerry and Larry probably had said, oh, they're doing testing at such and such a time, and I went with them, So anyway, they hired in 2 weeks later another 200, and they hired in another 200, 2 weeks later. And I don't know what schemes they were getting, maybe still California or whatever. But by that time I'd been on some union jobs, welding jobs, boiler making jobs, various things like that. And so the post office was like, it was a career appointment. I mean, civil service, and I was not being impressed by, their by the way they were. And they would say, okay, you have 30 minutes for lunch, and there was 200 of us hired in, and we'd get to the cafeteria or whatever, and you'd be in line, and it would be 15 minutes or whatever or less. But what I did, I got my tray, whatever, and then I sat down and I looked at my watch. Okay, I'm going to take 30 minutes. And was I not merciful? Actually, I'd probably be done in 25 minutes, So I would actually return what I consider to be 5 minutes. When I went back, nobody said anything to me, I don't think. But it was they were looking at me or whatever. What's wrong with this guy? We all left, and this guy shows up 30 minutes later or something or other. And they were looking at me, and I think that was before we had all the shootings from the at post offices. What was it thing? If you see a flag at half staff or something, it means the post office is hiring, something like that. But then they were bugging me about the learning the scheme. There was, right in that time, that was the first place, I think. I got the flu. It was off for a week. And then the next job I went to, whatever, same thing, I got the flu or something. Maybe it wasn't the next job. And then there was another job where I got the flu. That was a job where I was up on top of, the first day for that job, I was up on top of, hired in, up on the top of a railroad car, welding, and it was cold. uh, wind was blowing everything else, and I was looking at these other guys. I'm thinking, God damn, man, how can they do this all this kind of stuff. And then when I was driving home, then I realized, oh, I've got something. I've got the flu. I've got something. And I went home, and I was off for 3 or 4 days. And then I was getting ready to come into work. I'll tell you, it's not a good trait that I've had. I just hate for somebody to tell me to do something, and especially if I'm already, doing it or getting ready to do it or something. It just rubs me the wrong way, and there's some other things that rub me the wrong way. So I went home, with that, and I was off for like 3 days or something, and I'm getting ready. I'm putting on my work clothes, my boots, and all that kind of stuff, and the phone rings, and it's the supervisor. Are you coming to work or not? I said, yep, I'm dressing now, and I'll be there. And that pissed me off. Then, too, he was the same one that it was actually called they called it the what did they call it? The shipyard? No. That's where they made, during World War II, the landing craft. I mean, one of the places, there was places all across, in order to get the landing crafts all across the United States, there were, if you had some water, you could, but anyway, but I had a lot of jobs, those jobs, some of those jobs I mentioned, not the post office, but some of those jobs that I mentioned were, border making jobs. One of the jobs later on, welding jobs, was for the KW Dart Truck Company. And a lot of people, you've heard of Kenworth, 18-wheeler trucks. It's supposed to be like the Cadillac, I think. I don't know anything about truck driving, but it's supposed to be the Cadillac of 18-wheelers or over-the-road trucks or whatever. And but next to it was their Kenworth, was the Dart Truck Company, same company. And they built gigantic trucks, trucks bigger than this house, I mean, gigantic trucks. And I worked in a body shop, and really good money, and it was United Auto Workers. And why was I mentioning that? I don't know. Anyway, when I got married at age 26, the wife was 18, and she had just started a tropical fish shop. In fact, she was 18 and I was 26, and her parents owned a tavern, and her dad was, the owner and bar guy. And my parents frequent their, and I guess Darlene's mother was telling my mother, how great her daughter was, and my mother was telling, her, how great her son was. Oh, God. And anyway, my mother got the phone number for Darlene, and so my mother says, "Oh," and I'm not calling, especially not somebody phone number you'd get, And I forget. I think that's about the time that the Cuban Missile Crisis was going on. There was something going on like that, and my parents. I was still living with my parents. I lived with my parents till I was 26. And when I got married, then I stopped living with them. So I had no intention of calling, but I think my parents were in the Ozarks on a vacation, and I think there was something going on, and I thought, oh, well, wait a minute. So I called the number, talked to Darlene, and she had almost, she had zero experience dating. One, she was, physically handicapped, had to use crutches. And the other thing was, what was it? Well, she, she thought she had dated a guy, a young guy. That she went to the art institute. She was artistic, not autistic, artistic. They sound the same, don't they? And so that was the Kansas City Art Institute, and she went there, and she dated a couple. She dated this one boy from the Art Institute, and he would drive over, pick her up or something. Then he would drive over to a bar or something, a gay bar, and he would sit outside, or they would sit outside, and then he would be telling her, "Isn't that guy cute?" That type of stuff. And then I think eventually, I'm not sure exactly when she realized that that was not a normal date. And but anyway, and then I think even when she found out, I think she thought, well, she could, convert him or change him or something with it. But anyway, he called her up at home, and he said, guess where I am? I guess I don't know, And then he said, I'm at, I'll make up a name, Dwight's, place. And then she said, oh, I guess, And then maybe she said, well, what are you guys doing, And then he said, well, we're in bed together, and something like that, And so that was that was her experience. But anyway, how did I get on that subject? I don't know. Anyway, we got married, and so she had started a tropical fish shop, and so her mother and her handled it for a little bit, and then Darlene said, that her mother was tired of, doing it, and so I had to take over the shop, and I said, hey, I'm working about one of the best paying, jobs, welding jobs and everything, and she said, well, you've got to do it or whatever, and so I did that. We had that for 4 years. Then I ended up, after 4 years of the tropical fish shop, I was keeping the books, and I could see we just weren't, it just wasn't, it was just, and during the warm weather, nobody wanted to buy fish, tropical fish. But anyway, we tried other things, we tried pet supply, collars and that kind of stuff. Then we tried pond supplies. I really thought that would go over, water hyacinths, that kind of stuff. And then we then brought in birds, some parrots and parakeets and stuff like that. That didn't go, And it, so anyway, at about that point, when she agreed, I said, if our business doesn't improve by, I forget what the number was, 20% or something, we'll just, go out of the business. And so I could tell way ahead of time we're not going to make it, There was a pastor, he had a Church of God pastor, and he was into tropical fish, and he came in and he kept saying, he said, if you ever want to sell out or whatever, and everything. Anyway, it was the official, time. I mean, the newspaper with that. This was the thing, and he was the first. I unlocked the shop, and he was the first guy that came in. And I said, "You want to buy the place?" And he said, "Yep." And I told him how much, and it wasn't very much, but it was. So he said, "Well, why don't you just go ahead and close up and go with me over to the bank, and I'll give you the money." I told him, though, I said, "You have to be open on Sundays." And he said, "Oh, no problem." And I said, "No, you need to be open on Sundays. That is a big day." And anyway, he took over the shop, and then his parishioners didn't like him working Sunday, which I can understand. And so he closed on Sundays, and then before long, I don't know how long, because I didn't pay any attention to it, he sold it to somebody, and I think that was a young man who used to come in our tropical fish shop with his money, saved up to get fish when we started up. And anyway, then the person who bought, I think it was him. No, it wouldn't have been him. Okay, so that was somebody else that bought the thing, and then that person sold it to somebody who changed the name, because that we heard, that the person who bought it, I'm changing the name because it's Siggy's Aquarium has a bad reputation, and so then a few years later, at some point, I think I was working hospital security then. Yeah, I would have been working hospital security, and I worked hospital security for 30 years. But I was working at this one hospital. I never told anybody about any of this stuff. The people that I worked with, I never told them that any of this stuff. But anyway, I was working at main hospital or research medical center, bad neighborhood. Well, the first hospital I worked at, worst neighborhood in Kansas City, Missouri. Well, at that hospital, we had, out of a security force of 10, I think it was, we had 2 shot, one permanently disabled, and then the second, about a year later, killed. He managed to shoot the guy that shot him, but anyway, then the second hospital I worked at was in basically the same area as the hospital, St. Joe Hospital, where we had the 2 security officers shot. And they did have at St. Joe, at Trinity Lutheran, a security officer, Lloyd Akins, who was walking to work. He lived a few blocks away, didn't have a car, and he walked. He was on the sidewalk, and right over there was the hospital property there. And a guy came up to him and pulled the gun on him and said, "Give me your money," or something. And Lloyd said, apparently, I'd already been interviewed and put in for that hospital and was hired, but I was giving 2 weeks notice to the other hospital. But Lloyd said, "I don't think your gun's loaded," or something like that. And the guy said, "Oh yeah," and shot him. But the gun had a defective round in it or whatever, and it hit Lloyd's arm, broke the skin a little bit, but, But anyway, by the time I moved on to the third hospital, the first hospital that I worked at, was the worst neighborhood in Kansas City, Missouri. I know because I grew up in that area. And believe me, when I was going to De La Salle Military Academy, I walked home a few times. That would have been between 1955 and 59. I walked home a few times through the black neighborhood. Never was bothered. But anyway, when I was working at St. Joe Hospital, the neighborhood had really, it had changed. There was, what was it, SAC 20 or something like that. There was a militant black group that wore uniforms, and the way the houses were constructed there, people had basements. I know that because I lived in that neighborhood. And you could hear them in the, you could hear the gunshots in the, down in the basement downstairs, or, down in the basement practicing. Then with the second hospital I went to Trinity Lutheran Hospital, it was basically in the same area, but because it was over right off of Main Street, and there were a lot of businesses around it, and it wasn't as bad. Then when I worked at the third hospital, by that time, that was the bad, that was the bad neighborhood. And then I worked on at other hospitals. Okay, this has been 50 minutes. I'm going to stop. Going to go to bed. I'm tired. For the laptop computer, I think, did I mention that I'm waiting for, yeah. I'm waiting for
NPR News now from Amazon Music. Here's the latest episode, NPR News, February 28th, 2022, 12 a.m. ET.
Echo off.
Live from NPR News, I'm Nora Robb. On the fifth day of the Russian invasion of Ukraine...
Computer off. I'm going to disconnect that. My son has been, there's like 4 or 5 names you can use for Echo, and he keeps switching his name, or the thing that activates it, and so I'm just going to disconnect it. I think there's only 3 of us, but he keeps. So anyway, appreciate you listening and watching. Thank you very much.